Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is nothing at all. Not words, not explanations, not arguments, just silence. When you disappear, it isn't revenge. It isn't a game. It's a statement that says, I value myself more than your approval. And that's when everything changes. The moment you pull away, they feel something they never expected. Because silence is not empty. It's full of meaning. It forces them to face the truth they've been avoiding. It shakes their ego, stirs their emotions, and leaves them wondering if they ever really knew you at all. Here's the secret most people don't talk about. When you disappear, they feel more than they will ever admit. Confusion creeps in, ego takes a hit, and doubts start whispering in their mind late at night. The very control they thought they had slips through their fingers, and suddenly they are the ones haunted by questions. In this video, you will discover 9 hidden feelings they go through when you step back and give them nothing but silence. These are not surface-level emotions. These are deep shifts inside their mind and heart, things that can completely change how they see you. Stay with me until the end, because by the time we're finished, you'll understand why disappearing is not weakness, but one of the greatest powers you hold. Your absence speaks louder than your presence ever could. And once you learn this truth, you'll never look at silence the same way again. Confusion always comes first. When you suddenly disappear, the immediate reaction is a flood of unanswered questions. They ask themselves, what happened? Did I say something wrong? Did I do something that pushed you away? The silence you create doesn't come with an explanation. And that's exactly what drives the mind into overdrive. People are wired to seek closure, to connect cause and effect, to understand the why behind every action. But when you vanish without a word, the brain has nothing to hold on to. That emptiness turns into confusion, and confusion is uncomfortable. It gnaws at them, making them restless. They replay past conversations, dissect every word, and analyze your tone, searching for hidden meanings they might have missed. The more they try to make sense of your absence, the deeper they sink into uncertainty. That confusion is not just about you, it's about themselves, about their inability to control or predict what just happened. And that loss of clarity unsettles them in ways they won't admit out loud. This confusion also makes them hyper-aware of your absence. Every little detail that reminds them of you, your voice, your habits, your presence, is suddenly magnified. When someone is used to your energy and it disappears, the silence speaks louder than anything else could. They wonder why you didn't explain, why you didn't argue, why you simply chose to step back without warning. And that simple act, which may feel effortless to you, becomes a heavy weight for them to carry. They don't know if it's permanent, if you're angry, if you've moved on, or if you're just testing them. And that uncertainty leaves them scrambling for answers that don't exist. Then comes the ego shock. If confusion shakes their mind, ego shock rattles their pride. Disappearing isn't just absence, it's a bold statement. It says you refuse to feed their sense of control. It strips them of the comfort they once had, the belief that you would always be there no matter what. When you pull away, their pride takes the hit first, because ego thrives on certainty, attention, and validation. Suddenly those things are gone. They're not used to that void. They're not used to losing grip on someone who once gave them time and energy. And it bruises their ego in a way that feels like rejection, even if you never said a word. This ego shock is powerful because it flips the dynamic. They once thought they had the upper hand. Maybe they believed they could ignore you, delay you, or even take you for granted. But the silence changes everything. It's no longer about you chasing them. It's about them realizing they can't reach you. And that loss of control doesn't just sting, it forces them to see you differently. Your absence is proof that you are not dependent on their approval, and that's a truth their ego resists. The pride that once made them feel secure now turns into vulnerability. They might act unaffected on the outside, but deep down there's a sting they can't shake. It's the sting of realizing that someone they thought they had influence over has broken free from that hold. They're not used to being ignored. They're not used to being left with silence instead of an explanation. And that gap between what they expect and what they actually get creates the shock that unsettles their ego. This shock can linger for days, weeks, even longer, because pride doesn't heal quickly. When ego takes a blow, it doesn't just bruise, it lingers in the back of their mind, making them restless and uneasy. They replay moments where they felt in control and wonder how that power slipped away. They mask it with frustration, denial, or even arrogance. But the truth is, the silence has already unsettled them at the core. And that's why confusion and ego shock are always the first waves they feel when you disappear. They can't make sense of the silence and they can't accept the blow to their pride. Together, these two emotions are the beginning of a storm they didn't expect but cannot escape. Curiosity always follows confusion and ego shock, because once the mind fails to find answers, it begins searching for them outside. They want to know what you're doing, where you've gone, and why you've chosen silence. It's a strange thing. Your absence suddenly makes your presence feel even stronger. They start noticing the smallest details, things they once overlooked. If they used to scroll past your updates without care, now they pause. If they never bothered to check your status, now they're looking. Silence creates space, and that space becomes a vacuum their mind is desperate to fill. The more you hold back, the more their curiosity grows. They may start checking your social media, asking mutual friends, or scanning for any sign of your activity. They might even catch themselves visiting your profile over and over, even when they find nothing new. That emptiness becomes addictive in its own way, because every time they look and see no updates, no messages, no signals from you, the silence speaks louder. It makes them wonder what you're doing that doesn't involve them, who you might be spending time with, and whether your life has actually improved since you vanished. What they once took for granted now becomes a mystery, and human nature cannot resist a mystery. The interesting part is that curiosity always intensifies when there are no answers. If you gave hints, updates, or clues, their questions might quiet down. But when there's nothing, no signs, no breadcrumbs, their mind starts inventing scenarios. And often those imagined stories are worse than reality. They picture you being happier without them. They imagine you surrounded by better company. They even create ideas that you've replaced them, that your silence is a sign of strength they didn't expect. Each of these thoughts makes their curiosity spiral further, and instead of finding peace, they feed their own restlessness. But curiosity doesn't stay isolated. It quickly turns inward, spilling into doubt about themselves. When someone can't figure out why you've disappeared, they eventually ask the one question they don't want to face. Was it something I did? That's when insecurity starts to creep in. They replay their words, their actions, their behavior, searching for mistakes. Every small memory gets magnified. A careless comment they made weeks ago suddenly feels heavier. A moment where they didn't show appreciation now feels like the turning point. And in the silence, those doubts echo louder and louder. This doubt is powerful because it shifts the spotlight back onto them. They are forced to see their flaws without your reassurance to soften them. They no longer have your presence to remind them of their worth. Instead, the absence makes them question if they mishandled what they had. It's no longer about you simply disappearing. It's about them wondering if they pushed you into that decision. That thought eats at their confidence. Insecurity can take many forms. Some start blaming themselves openly. Others bury it under anger or denial. But no matter how they try to mask it, the silence has already done its work. It has opened the door to self-doubt. And once that door is open, it's hard to close again. Every unanswered question fuels another. Every moment of silence feels like proof that they may have done something wrong. And that insecurity only grows stronger the longer you remain absent. The power of curiosity and self-doubt lies in how they work together. Curiosity makes them look outward, searching for signs of you. Doubt turns their gaze inward, forcing them to question themselves. The combination leaves them unsettled, restless, and vulnerable. They wanted control. They wanted certainty. But your disappearance replaces both with questions they can't answer and insecurities they can't silence. Fear of replacement creeps in quietly, but when it arrives, it shakes them to the core. At first, it starts with subtle thoughts, wondering who you might be spending time with, who could be hearing your laughter, who might be seeing the side of you that once belonged only to them. That imagination grows heavier the longer you stay silent. In their mind, the possibility of someone else stepping into their place becomes a vivid picture. They start asking themselves questions they cannot answer. Are they happier with someone new? Have they already moved on? Did my absence even matter? This fear is far stronger than any words you could have spoken. If you had told them directly that they might lose you, they would have brushed it off, convinced themselves you were bluffing, or believed they still had control. But silence offers no reassurance, no defense, no hint of what's true or false. It leaves space for their mind to wander, and in that space, the fear of replacement becomes overwhelming. They know how quickly life moves. They know how easily people find new connections. And the thought that you may have already found someone who values you more than they did is a blow to their pride and their heart alike. The fear doesn't stop there. It forces them to compare themselves with invisible competition. They wonder if this imagined other person is stronger, kinder, more attentive, or simply more present than they were. Suddenly, every shortcoming they once dismissed becomes a sharp reminder of what they failed to give you. The very thought that someone else might be filling the space they left empty terrifies them, because it confirms that they were never as irreplaceable as they believed. That realization strikes deeper than any argument ever could, because it isn't about your words, it's about the pictures they create in their own mind. From fear, the next wave is regret. Once they've imagined losing their place, they start remembering all the moments they took you for granted, the times they ignored your messages, the times they dismissed your feelings, the times they thought you would always be there no matter what. Regret doesn't appear in silence immediately, but once it does, it grows like a shadow that follows them everywhere. Silence leaves them alone with their memories, and in that stillness, every mistake they made becomes louder than ever before. They begin to replay conversations where they should have listened but didn't. They think about the opportunities they had to make you feel valued but chose not to. They remember the times you asked for their presence and they gave excuses instead. In silence, these memories no longer fade. They resurface with intensity, and each regret feels like a missed chance they can never get back. Regret has a way of softening pride. While ego shock makes them defensive at first, regret breaks down those walls slowly. It replaces arrogance with reflection. It forces them to admit, even if only to themselves, that they mishandled what they had. This is the power of silence. It doesn't argue, it doesn't accuse, it simply forces them to face themselves. And often that quiet confrontation is far harsher than anything you could have said. The weight of regret grows heavier because it is tied to permanence. Unlike fear, which is rooted in imagination, regret is built on reality. They know the moments they wasted. They know the times they chose their comfort over your needs. And when they realize there's no way to undo those choices, regret turns into an ache that lingers. They can't erase the past. They can't rewrite the story. All they can do is sit with the silence and remember the things they failed to do when they had the chance. Together, fear of replacement and regret create a storm inside them. One makes them anxious about the present and future, while the other chains them to the mistakes of the past. And in that storm, they realize just how much your silence has shifted the balance of power. They are left unsettled, haunted by possibilities, and burdened by memories they wish they could change. Anger is often the mask they wear when silence starts to sting too deeply. For some, admitting confusion, fear, or regret feels too vulnerable. So instead, they reach for frustration because it feels safer to be mad than to admit they're hurt. They may tell themselves you're being immature or dramatic, or they may convince others that you're overreacting by disappearing. But underneath that anger is the sting of rejection and the bruising of their pride. It's easier for them to raise their voice in annoyance or to act cold and dismissive than it is to admit that your silence has unsettled them. This anger can show in different ways. Some lash out directly, sending short, irritated messages or making passive comments if they do speak to you. Others go silent in return, but with a different intention. They hope their own coldness will force you to break first. Anger is their shield. It gives them the illusion of strength, when in reality it's a reaction to losing what they thought they had, your constant attention. They are not angry at the silence itself. They are angry at what it represents, the truth that they no longer have the same grip on you. The more you stay quiet, the stronger that frustration grows. And here's the hidden truth. Anger often reveals care. If you truly didn't matter, your disappearance wouldn't spark such a heated reaction. The fact that it does means your silence has struck something inside them that words can't hide. They may complain, insult, or even dismiss you in conversations with others. But deep down, they're wrestling with the fact that your absence is powerful. That leads directly into the next wave they feel, the loss of power. This is the turning point where they realize the dynamic has shifted. Before, they may have believed they controlled the pace, the tone, and even the outcome of your connection. They might have thought they could ignore you for a while and still expect you to be there when they turn back around. But disappearing destroys that illusion. Silence doesn't just remove you physically, it takes away the power they once held over your emotions. When someone is used to having your attention, they come to rely on it like a guarantee. Your responses, your patience, even your willingness to explain yourself, all of these gave them the upper hand. But once you step back, that sense of control is gone. They can't predict you anymore. They can't provoke you with words. They can't rely on your reaction to reassure their importance. That's why the loss of power feels so unsettling. It forces them to see that you no longer play by their rules. This shift in control can be humbling. Suddenly, the person who once dictated the flow is now left waiting, wondering, and hoping for a response. The silence reverses the balance. They're no longer the one deciding when or how the interaction moves. They're at the mercy of your absence. And the longer this goes on, the more they realize that they can't dictate your feelings, your choices, or your worth. The loss of power also leaves them facing a truth they may have avoided. You were never as dependent on them as they assumed. Your disappearance proves that your strength does not come from them, and that reality weakens their own confidence. It strips away the illusion of dominance and reveals how fragile their control truly was. So while anger is their immediate defense, the deeper impact is this loss of power. Anger fades quickly, but the awareness that they no longer control the situation lingers much longer. They may try to regain it with games, with words, or with attempts to pull you back in, but once the power has shifted, they can feel it. Your silence has changed the dynamic completely. They can no longer dictate your emotions, and that truth is harder for them to face than any argument could ever be. Obsession has a way of creeping in when silence stretches longer than they expected. At first, they may try to brush it off, convincing themselves they don't care. They distract their mind with other people, other conversations, other habits. But the absence you leave behind is not easy to ignore. The longer you remain silent, the more space you take up in their thoughts. They wonder what you're doing at random times of the day. They replay old memories in their head, even the small ones that once felt unimportant. It could be the sound of your laughter, the way you phrased a certain sentence, or the little things you did without realizing. Suddenly, those details loop in their mind when they least expect it. The silence makes you a mystery, and mysteries are hard to resist. When you were present, they felt secure enough to overlook certain things. But now that you've disappeared, their mind keeps circling back to you, sometimes against their will. They think about you in the morning. They think about you at night. And even when they try to bury the thoughts, they resurface with greater intensity. It isn't always pleasant. They may even feel frustrated with themselves for being unable to let go. But obsession is not logical. It feeds off absence. And the more you withhold, the more their curiosity and longing blur into a constant cycle of thoughts they can't control. This obsession can take subtle or extreme forms. Some people begin to check your online presence repeatedly, waiting for any sign of activity. Others ask around quietly, trying to piece together what you might be doing now. For some, it goes even deeper. They start imagining conversations, what they would say to you if given the chance, what they would do differently if you returned. Every time their mind drifts, it seems to circle back to you, even when they want to focus elsewhere. That is the hidden power of silence. It plants you firmly in their mind, not by noise, not by effort, but by absence. Over time, that constant thinking begins to shift into something unexpected: respect. At first, they may have been confused, frustrated, even angry about your decision to disappear. But as the days stretch on, they slowly begin to understand what it truly means. Your silence is not weakness. It is strength. It is a declaration that you don't need to chase, explain, or beg for attention. And as they reflect on that, even if they never admit it out loud, a certain respect begins to grow. Respect comes because silence shows boundaries more clearly than words ever could. Anyone can talk about self-respect, but not everyone can practice it. By disappearing, you show that you are willing to walk away rather than settle for less. That strength is undeniable, and over time, they cannot help but recognize it. Even if their ego fights it, even if they never say it openly, deep down they know that it takes courage to step back and stay silent. Boundaries gain weight in silence. Every day you remain quiet reinforces the message: you are not someone to be taken for granted. You are not someone who will tolerate half effort or empty promises. You value yourself enough to create distance, and that kind of self-worth is magnetic. Respect begins where tolerance ends, and your silence draws that line more sharply than anything else. Eventually, the obsession and respect become intertwined. They think about you constantly, not just because they miss you, but because they are beginning to understand your strength. The very act that once frustrated them now commands their admiration. And though they may never confess it directly, a part of them will always carry that respect for you because silence taught them a lesson they could not ignore. Desire to return is the stage that almost always follows obsession and respect. After days or even weeks of wrestling with confusion, anger, and doubt, something shifts inside them. They begin to feel the pull back toward you. The silence that once frustrated them now feels unbearable, and the absence starts to weigh on them in a way they cannot ignore. It is no longer about curiosity or ego. It becomes a genuine urge to reconnect. They start thinking of excuses to reach out, small reasons that would justify breaking the silence, even if only with a short message. A simple memory might trigger it, or the sudden awareness of how much emptier their life feels without your presence. The longer you remain absent, the stronger this desire becomes. This longing doesn't come all at once. It builds slowly, piece by piece. At first, they wonder if reaching out would make them seem weak. They hold back, waiting for you to make the move. But the silence stretches on, and with each passing day, their resistance weakens. The urge to hear your voice, to see your words, to know where you stand grows heavier. Absence has a way of sharpening emotions, and what they once overlooked now feels priceless. They might even convince themselves that reconnecting will fix everything, because longing clouds judgment. All they know is that the silence has created a space they no longer want to endure. They may test the waters by showing up indirectly. A casual like, a small comment, a random check-in. Anything to see if the door is still open. For them, this is not just about breaking the silence. It is about easing the ache of longing that your disappearance has created. They crave the comfort of familiarity, the reassurance of your presence, and the relief of knowing that they haven't truly lost you. That desire is powerful because it comes from scarcity. When something once felt certain and is suddenly gone, the value multiplies in their mind. That brings them to the deepest stage, the realization of your value. Silence has a way of teaching lessons that words cannot. When you disappear, they are forced to live in a world without you, and that experience is often the hardest hit. They notice the empty spaces where you once fit naturally, the conversations that feel shallow without your voice, the moments that seem dull without your presence. It is only in your absence that they fully understand the role you played in their life. This realization cuts deeper than regret, because regret looks backward, but value recognition looks forward. They don't just see what they lost, they begin to understand what life will continue to feel like without you. If nothing changes, that vision is sobering. It makes them reconsider their actions, their words, and their priorities. They may even wonder how they failed to see it sooner, how they could have overlooked someone who brought stability, care, or light into their life. What makes this realization so impactful is that it isn't handed to them by you. It is earned through experience. No lecture, no argument, no explanation could ever create the same clarity as silence does. Living without you forces them to confront what they once dismissed. It strips away the illusion of permanence and shows them the truth. Your presence was not guaranteed, and now they feel the void you left behind. For many, this is the heaviest weight of all. To realize someone's value only after they are gone is both humbling and painful. It teaches them that silence is not emptiness. It is the mirror that reflects their own failures and their own losses. The realization doesn't fade quickly. It lingers, reminding them every time they think of you that your absence has changed them. And whether they admit it or not, they know they will never look at your worth the same way again. Silence is powerful. It confuses them, it stirs insecurity, and it forces them to face their regrets. Without you saying a single word, they begin to question themselves, their choices, and how they treated you. That's the strength of pulling back. Your absence speaks volumes in ways chasing never could. Remember, you don't need to prove yourself, beg for attention, or fight for respect. By holding your ground, you show that your value is non-negotiable. The silence becomes your voice, and it says more than words ever will. If this message connected with you, make sure to like this video, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more powerful insights.